So welcome to my top 10 PlayStation games of all time. And I've been really looking forward to doing this episode because I'm a huge fan of the original PlayStation 1, the first one that was ever released. And this was released in 1995. I got mine a year later. I was saving my pennies up and I picked this up. And I picked up Suikoden right here. A great RPG on the machine. And I fell in love. And I started buying all the games I could for the machine. And it became one of the true classics of all time. Honestly, the first PlayStation is one of my favorite machines of all time. So many amazing franchises on there, and I'm going to talk about some of them today. Before I get into the top 10 list, I'm going to show some honorable mentions. As I showed you before, Suikoden right here, number 1 and 2, phenomenal RPGs. You got to try them out on the machine. Incredible graphics at the time, really good stuff. And Final Fantasy IX is a true classic in the series, one of the last medieval games in the series, and I hope one day they return to the roots of this game with the crystals and all that great stuff. And obviously, I gotta say, Grandia. Grandia is a phenomenal RPG. I spent way too many hours playing this game. Me and my friends all finished this game back in the day. Loved it. Now, the one thing I enjoyed about the PlayStation back then was it introduced me to games that I would have never played before. One of them was Ace Combat 3. This game was so fantastic. I'd never played a flight simulator. I played Top Gun on the original NES, but I wouldn't really call that a really great flight simulator. This was full of action, and I just loved the dog fighting, and I was so transported into the game, and it made me an Ace Combat fan for life after that. Now, to begin with, I always have to say this with every top 10 list that I do on the channel. This is my personal top 10 list. These are games that have meant something to me. I've finished all of these games over the years. That's why I'm recommending them. There is no official top 10 list online. These are just my personal opinions and my personal games that I really love. Tell me below, what are some beautiful, wonderful, incredible PlayStation 1 games that you absolutely love? Leave it in the comments down below so everybody else can go in there and find some other really amazing games to play. Now, at number 10, a lot of people would say Gran Turismo. They would pick that, and they would be right. That's a really great game. For me, I was more of an arcadey style type of guy. And when I played the demo of this, I was just graduating film school. I played the demo every night. It made me a true believer in racing games, and I wasn't before that. Just like Ace Combat, I wasn't into flight simulators. And guess what? Namco was also getting me into racing games with Ridge Racer Type 4. I'm even wearing the shirt here because I'm a true fan of this. And I remember playing the demo night after night, the same level over and over again. And I became so good at that. And I just loved the music. I loved every single thing about this game. I liked the controls. It just felt so easy to play and so accessible. And I think that's the main thing with Ridge Racer Type 4. And I enjoyed the Ridge Racer games after this, but this one is a true classic and one that always sticks with me. At number 9, I was a huge Street Fighter guy. I was nuts about it. And when I found out that this game was coming from the arcade onto the PS1, well, I was a little excited. I remember I used to do lists back in the day of all the games that I wanted on the machine. This was number 1. And here it is, my original copy of Street Fighter Alpha 2. This game is not just some game I played. This game I spent thousands of hours. I'm surprised that the disc still plays, and all the footage that I captured for all these games today, I captured off my original discs onto the FrameMeister. And so I just want to say that I fell in love with this game. I love the roster. I liked the backgrounds. It was so beautiful looking, but it was so great the way it controlled and all the custom combos you could do in the game. So much fun. And then coupled with my friendship with Rob back then, he would come over every day for an ass kicking. And I sat and taught Rob how to play Street Fighter by playing this game. And we had some legendary battles every day. Honestly, for around 4 to 5 hours a day, we would play Street Fighter. We'd make tea and play Street Fighter all day. And it was ridiculous. And I liked Alpha 3 as well. But this one is where I really spent so many hours playing, and what a true classic. Even to this day, it's up there as one of my favorite Street Fighters. Now, I gotta say, there was one company that took full advantage of the hardware and the power of the CD format at that time, and I'm telling you, every single game they were doing back then was gold. Einhander was gold. Tobal, I even enjoyed Tobal back then. But one game that came out, it was a bit of a horror action RPG that none of us saw coming, was Parasite Eve. And this was a phenomenally interesting game, a very cinematic RPG, as they even say on the back here. Now, the game had everything that you wanted at the time. Incredible cinematics. These cinematics blew your mind. I remember seeing the beginning and saying, oh my god, this can be done in a video game? Coupled with the spooky, haunting music throughout the game. And all the creatures and monsters are so interesting. I really loved running around, exploring the world, getting into combat, and the combat would kind of stop. You get a grid over you, and you can kind of pick which enemies you want to take down. It was fascinating, and I'm not going to give a lot of spoilers here for anybody who has never played Parasite Eve. This is a true classic on the PlayStation, and then years later, we got a sequel, Parasite Eve 2, and a lot of people will not agree with me on this, but I thought this held up incredibly well to the first one. In fact, there's certain moments in my life that I would say, I like Parasite Eve 2 more than the first game, but the first game kind of sets up the entire storyline, and it is haunting, it is incredible. It's one of those games to play at Halloween or any time of the year. Now, for the next game, I had to do a little bit of a setup for it. In the early 90s on the Super Nintendo, a very small game got released to very little fanfare, and that was Chrono Trigger. No, this got released to massive fanfare. Everybody fell in love with this RPG on the Super Nintendo. Akira Toriyama artwork, incredible battles, imaginative worlds, and time travel. A match made in heaven. And we were all waiting for a Chrono Trigger 2, where on the PlayStation 1, we didn't get that, but we got something else that is that. And that is Chrono Cross, a spiritual successor to Chrono Trigger. And there's a lot of arguments about this. There have been for many, many years. There's one camp that loves this game, and there's other camps that don't like it at all. They feel it doesn't live up to the Super Nintendo game, and I'm kind of there. I don't think it's a true sequel by any stretch of the imagination, but I think for the RPG that it is, what it does incredibly well. And I gotta stop for a second and say this. For all the games I'm talking about in this top 10 list, I gotta say, all of the music is amazing. I need to stop and say that now for all of these games, and I think that's why these games are my top 10. The music is transformative. It stands beyond the games. It really does. And Chrono Cross, as much as the storyline is very interesting, the characters are very interesting, the environments are very interesting, the music sets this apart and makes it its own thing. Music that I'm still listening to all of these years later. But never mind that, this is also a really good RPG with engaging combat. Now, I remember seeing the next game on a demo disc, just the movie playing of it, and I was like, oh my god, is this for real? And this is before the internet the way it is now. This is how you saw some of these games for the very first time were on demo discs. They were handed out because that was the only way to get it to players. You couldn't really download things the way you can now. So I was checking out this demo disc and I'm like, look at this game. And that was for Final Fantasy Tactics. This combined two things that I loved, Final Fantasy and strategy games, and they were combining them both into one game. Now, they could have missed the mark here easily, but they didn't. They created a true classic of all time. And I spent so many hours building up my troops, fighting on the plains. And it really is a strategy game in that you're trying to defeat a certain amount of enemies within a certain space. And you got to use the advantages of the terrain to defeat the enemies. And oh my god, hundreds of hours playing this, and I had some very frustrating battles. I'd get wiped out and I was like, oh my god. So I just go back and start leveling up and improving my troops, and I absolutely love this game. And I always remember also getting this game, and I met my friend Rob at Burger King, and he'd gone to EB Games that morning. He picked himself up a game and he had bought me this, and I went to meet him at this Burger King, and I sat down and he slid me the game. It was like this mafia deal, and I slid him $100 under a burger or something. And I remember getting this and taking it home and having such a wonderful time. And again, I'm gonna say the music is up here beyond anything else. The gameplay and everything are second to none, but the music is something else, and one of those games you have to play. And I really hope on modern hardware they will revisit this game on a console one day. Now, the PlayStation console was truly innovative in creating truly innovative games, and one of those games was a brand new game that we had not seen before quite like this, and that was Resident Evil. But the true game that made me a believer for life was Resident Evil 2. This game was a showstopper, and as much as I enjoyed the first game, this game felt more accessible. Its gameplay was more arcadey, a little bit more fun to me. I loved running around with shotguns, blowing the heads off lickers. This was really a lot of fun, and you could go through the game with different scenarios, and I finished this game in a weekend, and I was so glad there's 2 scenarios because I beat the game again with the next character. Wow, what a true horror fantastic weekend I had. I was a little hungover playing the game, I was a little shaky, and that was perfect, especially going into the final laboratory underground, which I thought was so cool. And recently, we got Resident Evil 2, the remake. They did such a great job remaking this game, but this is a true classic on the PlayStation. Now, I think in a quantum reality, for me personally, this should be number 1. This should be my number 1 game on the machine. It's up there. It's really up there. It's a true classic, and it's one of those ones that a certain amount of people have played. It's a cult game to those people, and one of those games you can never forget about. And it's one of those games that I personally have never reviewed because I just feel I can't do it justice because the game is still bigger than me. And that game is by Squaresoft, and it is Xenogears. This game is all-encompassing. It is the biggest, craziest RPG that I have ever played. And I'm talking from a story standpoint. This game spans so many years and so many characters and has so many dark themes that you'll have a hard time wrapping your head around it. Yes, I know, when you get to the second disc, it feels a little rushed. But what they set up, the universe they created in this game is one of the best RPG experiences I've ever had. And yes, the music is great. The combat is so much fun. You can do little combos in there. And also, when you jump into your gears, these giant mecha-sized robots, and you can do combat in them within the world. Oh man, when I first played this on the PlayStation 1, I couldn't believe the epic adventure. And I remember going into film school every day, and one of my friends in there, his name was Aaron, also known as Satan, we would, be having a coffee every morning talking about the night before, about what we experienced with Xenogears and how incredible it was. And yes, there's a lot of Xeno games that have come since, but none have ever been quite as exceptional as this. There's a lot of deep religious themes in here. A true classic of all time. Now, how can anybody have a top 10 list of PlayStation games if you don't put in, and of course it's going in there, Castlevania Symphony of the Night, a true classic, one of those ones I was reading about in Die Hard Game Fan magazines. They were talking about how the animation was unbelievable and incredible, and the gameplay would, knock your socks off. And yes, it knocked my socks off. This game is a true classic for all Castlevania fans. And yes, the terminology Metroidvania realistically started from this game and has continued onwards to this day. And most of these Castlevania games follow the same kind of gameplay as this, that you get different abilities, you can go to different sections of the castle, and when you get a new ability, you can go back and unlock different things, and this was incredibly addictive. And Koji Igarashi did such an amazing job with the gameplay and the castle, and eventually the castle, flips around and you have an upside down castle. Yes, and never mind the music. I already said that the music in all these games is really good. But this is in my top 5 video game music of all time. I still listen to this day. And you know what? You can get this on PS4. I highly recommend doing it. A real classic of our time. Now we're on the last few games here. And boy, are they goodies. These games are amazing. And they stand up incredibly well. People are still talking about these game series to this day now. And there's a reason for that. The first game, was originally an overhead action kind of RPG game, which was really, really good. We never got the MSX games. We got the NES games. They were a bit of a mixed bag. But Hideo Kojima was working on something that was going to blow our minds, and that was bringing Metal Gear Solid into full 3D. And this game was a wow factor. I remember reading in video game magazines back then how Hideo Kojima was building all of the levels out of Lego. And that's how he was figuring it out, because we were going from a world of 2D graphics and now on side view graphics to full 3D. And I think even the designers were trying to wrap their heads around, how do we do this? Because it was brand new territory. But he came in swinging with an amazing story, with David Hayter doing the voice, and what an amazing voice he is. He's the classic Snake for the entire series. Wonderful stuff. A really deep story, really perplexing characters, great gameplay, and such wonderful 3D environments to traverse, and so many items and weapons that you get, which allow you to go through this game any way that you want. You can go in with guns blazing, or you can use stealth just to sneak through the levels. And some argue that this is the best Metal Gear game ever made. There was many sequels after this, but a lot of people say this is the best. And now we get down to number 1. This was an easy choice for me to do. This was created by Squaresoft. You know what I'm talking about. Era Guys, God bless. No, it's not Era Guys, God bless the ring. I've done that joke twice in these. Sorry about that. That game is not there. It's a fun game, but what we're going to talk about is an amazing game. Final Fantasy VII is my number 1 game on the PlayStation hardware. This was one I was waiting for, like millions of other players out there, to be released. The ultimate in RPGs. This was the RPG that was going to be on the N64, and then they switched and they went to the PlayStation hardware because they wanted to use the full capacity of the CD-ROM. They thought, cartridges would hinder the game, and they didn't want to hinder the game. They want to load it full of cinematics and incredible music and gameplay and characters, and that is what we got. And I feel I was waiting for this game for like 50 years before it was released, because I was so hyped for it. I remember me and my friends would just get together and talk about it and go, oh my god, it's only another 8 months till it's released. Oh my god, can we wait that long? I had posters all over my room. I went to pre-order the game and got the shirt at the time. I mean, Final Fantasy VII was a massive game, but at the same time, it had the possibility of not living up to that hype until you played it. This was a time when I didn't see the movies ahead of time. I didn't hear the music ahead of time. I had to go in and play the game for the first time to make up my mind before I, could play the game itself. And when I played the game, it absolutely lived up to the hype and then some, with all of the characters, the combat, the music, the world setting, everything. Sephiroth. I was so taken back by Final Fantasy VII, and I have a lot of nostalgic memories for this game. I have a lot. I remember seeing the advertisements for it everywhere, on television, the commercials. I don't think I've ever seen a bigger push for RPGs in my entire life. I don't think I ever will since, But the one thing I will also say about Final Fantasy VII and the push to push an RPG into the mainstream was we all won because after this, there were so many RPGs released on the PlayStation 1, and that's what made it one of my favorite consoles of all time, and that's all thanks to Final Fantasy VII, a true classic of our time. What a wonderful game for sure. So guys, what are some of your favorite PlayStation 1 games? Let me know down below. This is my top 10 list. I had a really good time today talking about all these wonderful classic games. So anyways guys, until next time.